Welcome to the latest episode of First Word in Sport. Recording this early Monday morning. The sun is shining. Tottenham are still a Premier League team. As my 10-year-old would say to me, sad times. How are you doing, James?
Very good, Luke. Yes, disappointing yesterday regarding Tottenham staying up, but West Ham have gone down, so we've got West Ham Millwall twice next season. I think for the first time in 24 years, I believe, is the last time they played each other in a game of football. So good luck the authorities. Probably be a 10 a.m. start those two games, but yeah, Tottenham survived only because their 1-0 victory yesterday. But yeah, squeaky bum time. But it's like they celebrated like they're winning the Premier League with fireworks and players kissing the badge and all this business. Absolute nonsense.
It does make me smile a little bit. So I was asked yesterday why I take such joy in Tottenham struggling and why I'd have enjoyed Tottenham going down quite so much. And I think the reality is that at the start of the year they were a genuine rival of Villa's in terms of competing for those top 5 or 6 places. And that's all I want is for my football team to do the best it can, and Tottenham not being there or being in the Championship would be part of that. And I think that's why I was hoping that Tottenham went down. There's also an element of just pure comedy that a team could be run so poorly for not just this year, but this season's been a culmination of 2 or 3 years of really poor spending, poor managerial choices, and an awful lot of injuries, to be fair to them. And I'm not sure we'll get too many more opportunities like this where you have a genuine opportunity to lose one of the bigger clubs, at least for a season or two. The silver lining, James, is that we have lost West Ham. I'm not going to feel bad about it. They've been sort of teetering on the brink for a little while. They've had some horrendous transfer windows in recent times. And I do feel a little bit sorry for Nuno in that it took them a little while to get started, but they haven't been playing like a relegated team in recent months. And I think they will rue that they made such a poor start to the season.
Yes, all of the above. I mean, the thing with Tottenham is obviously it's one of the big clubs to go down if they went down, and you could get some of their players cheaper than you actually could now because they're in the Premier League. And Tottenham have got a very big, bloated squad. They're going to have to restructure that squad there at Tottenham. But yeah, West Ham, so they go down with 39 points, which is the third most in the Premier League, the joint third. They actually hold the record with 42 points in 2002-03 season. Bolton in 97-98, Sunderland 96-97 was 40, and then West Ham have equalled Birmingham and Blackpool's record and Middlesbrough's record. So it's quite a lot of points to go down. Financially, they are absolutely in a mess. They're going to announce their results soon, and that's going to be another massive loss after the £104 million loss last year. We knew they were going to have to sell anyway, but yeah, they've got some real issues, and the fans are disenchanted with it completely, kind of thing. That ground will be soulless in the Championship against the likes of Lincoln or Bolton, who went up yesterday. Didn't they beat Stockport in the playoff final? So it's going to be interesting. West Ham Bolton on a Tuesday night. How many fans are going to turn up there? Sullivan has got an awful lot to answer for there, and I know a lot of West Ham fans are going to be really disappointed. Well, angry, not disappointed with the way he's managed that club.
So I always think the people who get away with these things a little bit more than they should are the players. So, it's all going well saying, Sullivan should look at himself and all this. West Ham has spent a not insignificant amount of money in the last, 2 or 3 years. Certainly spent enough that should have seen them comfortably survive. And, he stuck his hands in his pockets again in January to get Castellanos, Disasi, Pablo. So it's not like they haven't spent any money. They've just spent it obviously poorly. So there's been some poor decision making there. But as much as anything, I think the players have to have a look at themselves. I see so many players at West Ham on big contracts. They came in for big money, and they haven't performed anywhere near the level that would be reasonably expected. So a good example would be someone like a Kilman, who I think West Ham were on the hook for quite some time. and he costs the best part of 40 million. He'll be on best part of 100 grand a week, and he's been absolutely woeful. And those are the sorts of transfers that absolutely kill you. And the problem they have is they aren't going to have any takers for what he's produced in a West Ham shirt. Massive wages. They're going to be stuck with that albatross of a signing probably for the next 4. I think he's got contracts until 30 or 31 or something. So they've got that contract for another 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, and didn't they buy Nicholas Fulcrum at the same time as him? They sent him on loan. Yeah, they've got huge issues wage bill. James Ward-Prowse, another one they bought, sent him on loan to Forest. Couldn't get a game because Nuno didn't want him. Nuno's come here. Sent him on loan to Burnley. Got another year, 2 years left on his contract. He's not going to be on shy of 100 grand, is he? So, yeah, these players, they just haven't worked out at all. I mean, Max Gilman has to be one of the worst transfers in living memory. Just not for West Ham, but in the whole of the Premier League. Hasn't played any minutes since January.
I think one of the problems West Ham have got is, with the financial problems, I can't imagine Somerville stays. I can't imagine Castellano stays. Bowen would only be staying out of a misguided loyalty, probably. He's way too good a player for the Championship. And, you suddenly strip out those 3 players from an attacking point of view. Good chance Fernandes goes from central midfield. And Disasi is going to go back on loan back to his parent club Chelsea, and suddenly you're stripping out all the good things that has been at West Ham, and what you're left with is you are left with the rubbish, the players you don't want, the players on the bloated contracts, and actually, I could see West Ham really struggling next year.
Yeah, and you can add Diouf at left back as well. The kid that they've got, the 21-year-old left back. Teams will be looking to get him cheaper than they would do if they were still in the Premier League. Yeah, exactly, as you say. And I don't look at any of their kids coming through and go, oh, the likes of Potts and Scales have done all right, hasn't he? Is it Scales, the young lad?
Scales, yeah.
Scales, sorry, not Scales. Scales, he looks all right, but yeah, they're going to have a lot of dead wood that aren't good enough and they've been proven not to be good enough. Yeah, so
I think the other bugbear from yesterday is the Tottenham players, as you say, their reactions. Kissing the shirts, as if this means the whole world to them, as if nothing's ever meant more to them than this. And it is all so performative. It's all for the cameras. All these players, they could not have given less to the team in that period between October, November, December, January, February, March. To find themselves in that position. That a squad, even with injuries, that talented ended up where it did, is a reflection of both managers and the players. And those players, they can pretend they care all they want. And one of the worries I would have for Tottenham is your Porros of the world are going to go back, if they're still at Tottenham next year, and that attitude is going to still absolutely stink the place out next year. And it's just so hard to actually make genuine change to a dressing room like that. There's too many players in that dressing room who have shown they just don't actually care.
Yeah, it's nice to see Romero actually attend after not wanting to attend and wanting to watch his team play in Argentina in the playoff game against River Plate. I think the shame actually got to him, or De Zerbi said to him, "You are the club captain, you get back here, because where you should be."
Is that just a media story blown massively out of proportion? I know he was in Argentina, but was he I haven't heard anything saying he wasn't intending to come back.
Well, there was reports on Friday saying he wasn't going to turn up, reported by Matt Law of the Telegraph, kind of thing, and he would no contacts in the club. So, look, anyway, yeah, I mean, De Zerbi has history of though. He will go in there and he'll be ruthless. He'll say. And they're not in Europe next season, and they've got a huge squad. I know they've got a load of injuries, but they've got some positions. They've got 2 or 3 players in every position. And De Zerbi, by the way, doesn't play kids. So those kids there, the likes of Bergvall, Gray, all this lot, they're going to be looking at the summer and going, we don't want to waste a season, because they only have minimum of 40 games next season, if you can include the 38 and the 2 cup games. They might not play at all, 1 game a week. You said it about Chelsea as well. before on last week's pod kind of thing, what they're going to do all week kind of thing. They've only got, one game a week, and it makes a big difference. They're going to have to strip down that squad. They're going to have to get rid of the bad eggs, the bad characters in that squad. The likes of Romero, Porro. I mean, would you send Paulinho back to Bayern Munich? I would, personally. I don't think you need him at all.
Well, I think if you're talking about having to get rid of players, like in terms of trying to trim a squad, is unless you had a taker for... I think they would want, the way De Zerbi plays, they'd want either Bentancur or Paulinho.
Yeah.
I think both is a touch excessive. But unless you've got a taker for Bentancur, do they really want to be spending 30 million euros or whatever the deal is for Paulinho? I don't know. It just seems to me that there's other areas that they could spend that money on more wisely, I think. And it'll be interesting to see how much money they do spend. And as you said, I mean, one of the problems is, as a club, they're focused on bringing in young talent. They've made a real focus of bringing in young talent. So as you say, the problem with De Zerbi, if De Zerbi's not going to play that young talent, like you take Sousa at left back, they've just brought him in. If he's not going to get looking for next 3 years under De Zerbi, what, Mikey Moore, will Mikey Moore feature next year? This is one of the players regarded as a generational talent. He has to be playing for Tottenham at some point.
Mikey Moore's not playing for Tottenham next season. They've got players ahead of him. Going back to Sousa, well, they're getting Andy Robertson on a free from Liverpool in the summer. He looks pretty nailed on to go to Tottenham. There's all the reporting that they've stayed up. So another experienced player kind of saying, I don't know where he's going to play.
And Senesi from Bournemouth.
I think Senesi might go elsewhere, but they're definitely interested in him kind of thing. But that means they're going to have to, again, for the kids, they're going to have a bloated squad. They're going to have to get rid of 5 or 6 players. If you look at that squad, it's ridiculous how...
I think that's going to be the underlying theme this summer, is how difficult it is to get rid of these squad players without literally giving them away.
Yeah, because these players can say, well, I don't want to go there, or I'm quite happy with my big wages here. And other clubs know this, so you have to... and there's not an awful lot of money flying around the lower end. Obviously at the top end there is, but yeah, there's going to be a lot of transfers before the World Cup, which starts in a couple of weeks, and obviously the panic stations for the last couple of weeks before the window shuts in September.
All in all, though, James, it was just... I think the disappointing thing was Everton started so poorly in that game. Although, hold on, John, if you're listening, Tottenham were amazing. One of the greatest performances I've ever seen. De Zerbi is a messiah. I get told off for not giving Tottenham enough credit on this run, and being critical of the fact that they've played 5 games to end the season against teams who basically have had nothing to play for, and played like they've had nothing to play for anyway. I think it's a shame there wasn't a little bit of jeopardy that Everton could have got one back just to make it a little bit nervous. It was all too easy in the end, but let's have a look elsewhere, because there wasn't much happening at the top. Obviously, a half-drunk Villa team went to Man City and ruined Pep's leaving party. Rarely, by the way, have you ever seen a game more of 2 halves. That first half, Villa got absolutely battered, and City could easily have been 2, 3, 4 and completely out of sight. And one thing I will say, by the way, so I'm not sure it was ever checked, but the City's goal, we talk about players being in front of goalkeepers and being in offside positions. I would need to see it again, but I'm not sure it was even looked at. And it's that inconsistency about when they pick and choose that particular rule that I think is incredibly frustrating. Second half, Villa absolutely murdered City. And then, just quickly, the most ridiculous thing of the weekend is all this guard of honour nonsense. You're in the middle of a game, and it was a good job it was basically a friendly at this point. In the middle of the game's stopping, and the players doing a little guard of honour, not once, but twice. It's like, this is meant to be professional football. You can do a guard of honour before the game, you can do a guard of honour after the game, but you don't stop in the middle of a game to do guard of honours.
Copying cricket, aren't they? When they come out, the batsman come out or bowler comes out when they have the guard on a bit. The cricket game stopped. I get it. Yeah, I mean, I saw it on Saturday evening. Danny Carvajal, who has left Real Madrid, the game stopped in the 81st minute, and both teams stood on the halfway line and let him walk down the guard of honour. And then he obviously saw it. Yes, it was just Stones to take it, and Bernardo.
It's Bernardo first, and then Stone second. And the problem,
Stones. He's been there 7 years. He's been
no. He's been there longer than Pep.
Has he? Oh, right, okay. Apologies, but yeah.
But and by the way, he obviously started the game. He should not be on that plane to the World Cup. I think we saw again Henderson yesterday. Anyway, so just going back to that, the Guard of Honour stuff is the serious consequences to that game. You know,
Yeah.
if you're a Bournemouth or one of those teams in sixth place, with the way the league is working, they needed Man City to win that game against Villa, so Villa would potentially finish fifth. Right? A Guard of Honour in the middle of the game doesn't help these teams in terms of playing it in a sort of professional manner.
Kind of tend to agree with you. There was two at Anfield, obviously yesterday with Salah and Robertson kind of thing, and Brentford. I know exactly. Yeah, it's just I don't know where it's come from. This guy, I can understand it during start of the game, and I can understand at the end of
Start
the
the
game.
game, after the game, whatever, fine.
Yeah.
But you're not stopping games in the middle of the game, and it literally takes all the momentum out of the game. I don't know. It made it just feel like literally like a friendly, pre-season friendly type of thing. And there's still serious points to play for, prize money, European places, all this sort of stuff. But anyway, let's.
You know what the worst one is though ever. This is the thing talking about it. When John Terry retired at Chelsea, he had a Guard of Honour and he went off in a 26th minute because his shirt number was number 26.
Talking Guard of Honours, you'll like this. One of the funnier tweets I saw this on social media yesterday was the Guard of Honour that Arsenal got was in the corner, and just how appropriate it was that the corner flag effectively got a Guard of Honour. The fact that the players run out at Selhurst Park in the corner is neither here nor there, James. But I just thought that was quite amusing. But in terms of yesterday, I think that the big headline yesterday really was Sunderland. I mean, you just have to take your hat off to the job that Lebris has done. And what I would say about Sunderland is they were willing to spend money in the summer to try and stay up, and fair play, they've achieved that. And not only have they achieved staying up, but they've finished seventh. Wow.
Manager season performance, arguably one of the greatest seasons ever by a club in the Premier League. Now, everyone was saying they're going to go down. Yeah, they spent £100 million plus. They got basically 7 or 8 first team players, brand new first team players. And I'm a big believer in you can change your first 11, your best 11, 2, maximum 3 players. Just because of the structure of the players, understanding all of the above. And they changed 6 or 7, if not more, kind of thing. And they got a tune out of him straight away. They had a great start. Stadium flight, hard place to go. They beat a lot of teams, kind of thing. And to finish 7th in the Premier League, it's just a remarkable achievement. It's going to be underplayed because of what's going on elsewhere and things like that. But they finished 7th, and you got everyone talking about Brentford having a great season under Andrews, and Hertz having a great season at Brighton, and Iriola having a great season at Bournemouth. Well, the Breeze has done better in my view. It's remarkable how they've finished 7th in the Premier League. It's brilliant to see.
Because I think the thing I always say about spending the money, and it's a problem I certainly remember with Villa back when we came up from the Championship, and you see it with Leeds and you've seen it with Forest, is you have to remember where these teams are starting from. And if every team in the Premier League is spending 100 million, and you're coming up and spending 100 million, you're effectively standing still. And the problem you have as a Sunderland is Sunderland only scraped up and they were lucky to come up in some respects from the Championship. They were a very, very ordinary Championship team. And as you say, they were big favourites to, go down. And so just keeping them up would have been a pretty miraculous job, to be honest. and he's done not only that, as you say, but to get them 7th place. I mean, I just, when you're looking for managers and having something a little bit about them and being able to get a team to play as a team, getting those intangibles in terms of what makes a team, getting a bunch of individuals to, wanting to play for each other and play with the intensity week in, week out. You have to just admire what Lebris has done.
100%. Considering what other managers have been around this season with Howe, Slot, the two that survived, kind of thing. I think managers become so much more important now. It's been highlighted the way the Premier League's finished this season, or position-wise, anyway.
So, in terms of other things from yesterday, obviously Chelsea lost to Sunderland. Obviously Chelsea finished in 10th place. I mean, it's been an unbelievable collapse in recent weeks to finish there. From, it's one thing if you'd started the season poorly and you ended up there, but they were in pretty good shape at Christmas, and it's been an unbelievable collapse really this year for them to finish down in 10th. But it has been on the cards for several weeks. I remember sending a message to you and John actually saying that I thought Chelsea might struggle to finish top 8, and this was when they were still in 4th place. Because you could see the fixtures, the fixtures to end the season looked tough, and they were just having so many issues in terms of attitude of the players and things like that.
Yeah, they're probably actually quite happy they're not in Europe though next season with all their squad ratio rules and things like that.
Well, we'll see how it actually pans out in terms of what they can do to get round it. If they're willing to pay fines, and who knows, there's all sorts of different aspects to it, but I mean, a truly horrendous season for Chelsea. What we're going to do in this podcast, we're going to talk a little bit later, we're going to grade every team as to how they've performed this year, so we'll touch more on Chelsea then. In terms of, I mean, there weren't that many other really notable performances yesterday. I mean, one would be Brighton. They had the opportunity. The opportunity was there with other results to finish in the Europa League spots. They've ended up 1 point behind Sunderland, so even a draw yesterday against United would have seen them in the Europa League, which is so much bigger than the Conference League. So I think Brighton, having lost to Leeds in injury time the week before, they'll certainly be having regrets about how the sort of season finished for them. They're not great at getting results when you expect or need them to. There's just something about it they just struggle with.
Yeah, considering United, no Casemiro and things like that, and they went there in 3-0. So Brighton have had a shocker the last couple of weeks. And then obviously Liverpool, bang average, doesn't care if Liverpool spent 200 billion with Slot in charge. They wouldn't be able to cope. Brentford missed an absolute sitter in the last minute of the game, and if they actually scored that and won the game and took 2 extra points, they would have been 7th. I mean, the sitter they missed was I don't know what the XG on it, but you'd fancy him to score all day.
So, touching on the Guard of Honour stuff, I know that I saw some Brentford fans online were getting seriously irritated by Henderson and him, the amount of time he took to leave the pitch. Brentford were needing a result, and I do understand their frustrations. I know Henderson's been at Liverpool for a long time. He's had his time at Liverpool. He's had his send-offs at Liverpool. When you're chasing a game and you need urgency, get off the pitch and appreciate the sort of situation. It's not the Jordan Henderson show. It's Brentford trying to get into Europa League show.
I won't rant about Jordan Henderson on this podcast because people will be bored of it. So he left 3 years ago under a cloud because he threw his toys out the pram. I have a rant about him. Threw toys out the pram because Jurgen Klopp told him he wasn't going to be part of the first team. He then told his agency to go and find me another club. And he ended up in Saudi Arabia. Didn't like Saudi Arabia. Panicked, wanted to come back. So this was his first time back at Anfield for 3 years as a playing capacity. He's been back once before, but he's never had the send-off from the club, Liverpool Football Club, because Liverpool Football Club didn't respect the way he left the club. in a cloud. So yeah, but this minute that he comes off and he's getting a clap and a guard of honour, all this business, as you say, you're employed by Brentford, and Brentford are trying to get into Europe, and you're swanning off thinking you're still a Liverpool player. It was quite remarkable, and Jordan Henderson is a bang average footballer. Always was at the top level, and he's bang average now, and shouldn't be anywhere near that England squad on the plane at all. But it's all about Jordan Henderson himself, all about me, and it winds me up with him.
Well, I think what you'll find is his time at Brentford will not last long. I don't know how long his contract is, but it's the sort of stuff that sticks with fans, and it just annoys. You know, if you're an amazing player, an all-time great, you might go, oh, okay, but we're a long way from that, and I don't know. It just sent out the wrong message, I think, from a Brentford perspective. Good to see Newcastle lose again, and deservedly so against Fulham. Eddie Howe's got a massive job, but as I say, we'll touch on that a little bit later. And then obviously the big game, James, was Burnley Wolves. So Wolves managed to secure 20th place. I don't think anyone's going to miss either of those two teams, to be honest.
No.
And then obviously, I mean, I feel almost shamed that we haven't talked about the champions, Arsenal. You know, they obviously played a changed Palace team. I mean, Arsenal made loads of changes themselves as well. It was just a bit of a damp squib of a game, but Arsenal got the win. And actually, what's interesting is they won the title by 7 points in the end.
Yeah, nothing more to say to them. Congratulations, you won the title. It is probably the hardest league to win, just because of the physicality of it. And they won by 7 points. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter if you win by 1 point or 7 points, in my view.
And so probably the most important aspect of the season, in terms of when you look at the league table, was the team who spent least last summer finishing above the team who spent the most, James. I mean, I don't know if you know which those teams were.
Absolutely, we're not talking about spending again kind of thing. But John made an interesting point offline, actually, about this business that Aston Villa obviously finished fourth, and it had to be Aston Villa finishing fifth for the sixth place scheme to get the Champions League. That's absolute nonsense. Complete and utter garbage, that is. If you get the extra place, it should just go down to sixth. You can't just, because one team finishes fourth and fifth. No. If you want the six places, it goes to the six places, in my view. I agree with John.
I think you want to keep it as simple as possible.
Yeah.
And as I say, particularly when you've got those end of season distractions like Guard of Honours, and you know, it does have an impact on, you know, genuinely important outcomes for these clubs. We'll come back and talk Premier League towards the end of this segment or podcast. Is next season we see the mighty Hull City back in the Premier League. You know, obviously they had playoff success at Wembley on Saturday. They won 1-0 with a late goal from McBurney, and I mean, fair play. I mean, a team is like, the underlying numbers are horrendous. Hull's, you know, by any reasonable sort of metrics, when you look at them in terms of XG, they were lucky not to be relegated probably from the Championship, and have managed to get themselves promoted into the Premier League.
Yeah, and I think they were the first team to not concede in any of their three playoff games to go up. They obviously 0-0 at home to Millwall, beat Millwall 2-0 away, and then the win on Saturday. Yeah, I mean, they only survived last season on goal difference, not getting relegated to League One, to be 12 months later in the Premier League. I mean, I don't think how many points they might not get in the Premier League. I mean, we talk about it all the time, didn't we? With Wolves this season, will they break Derby's record? But crumbs almighty, they're going to really struggle. Really, really struggle.
So I think one of the things that really stands out is, I think this looks like one of the weakest, you know, as much as Southampton and everything that went round, you know, surrounded Southampton in terms of Spygate, is at least it felt like if Southampton had been one of the teams who came up, they would have given some account to themselves in the Premier League. I'm not saying they would have necessarily stayed up, but they'd have done. Let's put it this way: they'd have had a better chance of staying up than a Hull will, for example. And what it looks like is, I can't remember a week of 3 teams coming up to the Premier League. The Premier League's a ruthless place, and it's going to be so hard. I mean, even if these, and you can't imagine these teams spending crazy money either. They just don't have owners who are that wealthy. The money's not behind them. It's not like when Leeds came up and you got the 49ers behind them, and you feel like they can go and spend 150 million, 200 million, or whatever it might be. You don't sense that's going to be the case with any of Coventry, Hull, or Ipswich.
The only thing with Ipswich is Kieran McKenna has managed in the Premier League before, and there are players there that have played in the Premier League before, so they have some sort of experience and knowing how different it is to the Championship. But yeah, it's going to be a real struggle. And how they're going to attract players, kind of thing, to go there. Ipswich are the only ones really. Well, you might get Frank Lampard because of his playing career. You might get some players might want to go there. So he did that when he was at Derby back in the day. He attracted some kids from the likes of Chelsea and things to this. So let's see. But yeah, I can see them going. Well, I can see Hull and Coventry not getting more than 20 points each, kind of thing. Hull would be lucky to get 15 points, kind of thing. So yeah, it's.
So any other football stories catch your eye from the weekend, James?
Just a couple. Obviously Serie A finished yesterday, and Como finished 4th under Cesc Fabregas. It's quite a remarkable achievement there, because AC Milan are 5th and Juventus are 6th. So those 2 teams won't be in Champions League. But yeah, Como finishing 4th for the first time getting Champions League. I wonder if Fabregas will be in demand this summer for some teams. I don't know who, but there are reports that Liverpool spoke to him in December, so I still don't believe 100% Slot will be at the club, but it's looking likely. But anyway, and then one of the best stories for nights out, Lens won the Coupe de France, the French equivalent of the FA Cup, on Friday night against Nice. Their first time in 126-year history they won the French Cup. They took the cup back to their stadium, got back to their stadium at 4 a.m. in the morning, and the place was full. They opened up their stadium and just went on the beers at 4 a.m. in the morning with all their fans in the stadium. That's how to celebrate. It's just take the cup back to the stadium at 4 a.m. in the morning. Brilliant things.
That's what sport's about.
Correct. That's why I was surprised yesterday, and I was speaking to a couple of people yesterday about Arsenal. Yes, celebrate it at Crystal Palace, get the trophy list. I would have gone straight back on the bus and straight back to the Emirates, where all your fans were as well, kind of thing, and go and celebrate there again in front of your fans. That's what I would have done. But there you go. But yeah, fair play, Lons. And sorry, quickly, playoffs. So we had a playoff yesterday. We had Bolton beating Stockport, and today we've got League 2, Notts County versus Salford. But they're having VAR in the playoff final, in all 3 playoff finals. I don't get it. When the whole season's never been VAR'd, and now you get VAR. It's just like, in my view, you either have it or you don't have it. You shouldn't just bring it in for the final. I know people would say, well, you still want the big decisions to get correct, and amount of money and offsides and red cards, whatever VAR. But
okay, James, I'll ask you.
Not in the semi-final. So why is it in the final?
Question for you: what do you think the managers think? If you're a manager of a better team, do you want VAR? Yes or no?
Probably if you're a better team, yes. But players, though, they know if there's no VAR, they can get away with a lot of things. You see it when sometimes I watch Premier League teams.
That doesn't make the game better.
I know you're saying make a game better. I just think you have different rules for different. It's like the FA Cup and the Carabao Cup. You either have it in everything or you don't have it at all.
Any other? Obviously, one thing we are going to see in the Premier League, just going back to Premier League quickly, is that a few managers will be on their way in terms of leaving. So it looks like Marcus Silva is going to leave Fulham. I keep hearing him linked with Benfica to replace Mourinho. We've got Iriola. We don't know where he's going to go. He certainly shouldn't take a sideways move to a Palace or a Fulham. He's capable of doing a bigger job than that, I think. And then obviously you've got lots of chat about Slot and Howe in their respective positions. I do think one of the problems is that, in terms of, it's all going well getting rid of these managers, but, who would replace them? I'm not sure. Pereira isn't. I don't believe Pereira signed a new contract yet, or I'm not sure exactly what his position is at Forest, whether he's definitely confirmed longer term for that Forest job, or whether it was a really short term appointment. So there will be a few. Obviously, Chelsea have got Alonso coming in, so there are going to be a few interesting sort of developments. Obviously, got Man City as well with Pep leaving yesterday. Whether it feels inevitable it will be Maresca, but that's to be sort of seen. United have obviously got Carrick for next year as well. So lots of change in terms of managers ahead of next year.
Two biggest clubs in England have got Michael Carrick and Arne Slot as managers, and City have got Maresca coming in. If you're Arsenal, you're thinking, let's just win another one while we can.
I've touched on it before. I think the opportunity is there with other teams in turmoil for Arsenal to, maybe not a dynasty, but certainly to put
another one on the table quickly. Yeah,
2 or 3 in a row type of. Particularly if they can make some, because they're not miles away. They just need a couple of extra players, I think, offensively, and they're not miles away from, because they're so good defensively. They're not going to lose many games. I think they could easily string 2 or 3 together.
Correct. The other teams need to get their acts in order quickly.
So, anything else you want to talk about, James, before we talk about each team individually and how their season has looked?
No, not really. Let's go through the teams. Let's go through the...
Do you want to start from the top, or do you want to work from the bottom?
Let's go from the bottom. Let's go from the Wolves.
So, I think Wolves... They're a little bit unfortunate in that, they obviously had a couple of big sales pre-season, which never helps. With Cunha and Aït-Nouri, for example, leaving, and they just weren't replaced with quality players, and they've made a really poor start to the season, and they've never looked like getting remotely out of trouble. And I think it's big question marks for Edwards and whether he's going to be there next year or not. If we're grading A to F, James, it's tough to not give Wolves a big fat F.
Yeah. Mess on and off the field, and the noise around Rob Edwards. I thought the whole point of appointing Rod Edwards was for him to take them up from the Championship next season with Championship experience at Middlesbrough. And I think he was at Watford as well, wasn't he? And buying the likes of Adam Armstrong in January and things like this.
But I think that's always one of the dangers, is when you employ someone at that point with a Championship in mind, is it's very easy to go on the run in the Premier League where you're playing against properly good teams, to go on one of these runs where you don't win a game for months on end.
Yeah. So, it's E or F. It's not great.
I think F, and I think the only positive for them would be something like youngster Mane. So they do have a really talented young player there, who, just nature of the beast, they'll probably have to sell, which is where, football's brutal.
Yeah, they're going to, like Sir João Gomez and Moreno as well. Clubs will be interested in those two as well. But Mane looks a talent. Some will take a chance on him, I'd imagine.
I'm pretty sure Gomez is off. I saw him linked with a move for about 40-45 million, which seems probably punchy based on what he's actually done this year. But Burnley, can I just say, Scott Parker, anti-football, terrible team to watch under Parker. Obviously, they've been under Jackson in recent weeks, and they've actually had some okay performances. Did all right against Arsenal, did all right against Villa, did all right actually against Man City. But from a football perspective, ugly stuff.
They're expected to go down. They spent over £100 million in the summer, though, so I'm giving them a D/E. I'm not sure that anyone expected, but they've got a decision to make who are going to be in a job next season. Obviously, Craig Bednary's been linked, but nothing's been talked about there. So, yeah,
Well, Mr. Gerrard has been linked as well to that job.
Well, they can forget about coming up then if he's in charge.
But I think it is a classic yo-yo club where it is difficult because obviously they sold their best player in terms of Trafford as well, which never helps. You know, coming into the season, yes, they spent 100 million or whatever, but they didn't. I didn't sense that they were spending the money particularly effectively.
No, it's especially when you lose your goalkeeper as well, and then you have Trafford, and then you're replacing him with Juravka. You know what I mean? It's quite a big drop off kind of thing.
Obviously, West Ham. It's been a disaster, James. I mean, there's no sugarcoating it. I mean, they've obviously played a lot better in recent weeks, and they've ended up coming up 2 points short. And in many respects, you know, I think Tottenham have got 10 points from their last 5 games. You know, that didn't look very likely for large parts. You know, I'd have not believed for one moment Tottenham would have got 10 points from those last 5 games and where they were coming into those 5 games. So, I mean, you could argue a little bit that West Ham were unlucky that Tottenham's form picked up so much towards the end. And, you know, they've got a pretty high points total for a relegated team, as you touched on, but a real mess of a club.
Yeah, it would probably be another F for me from West Ham on and off the field, really. We talked about it earlier in the pod. There's nothing more to talk about with West Ham. It's been a dark times at West Ham, if you're a West Ham fan. But an F.
Right, let's get Tottenham out of the way, F.
Yeah.
I think let's just so there are a couple of aspects to this with Tottenham. So Tottenham spent
injuries is we've got to talk about.
Yeah, so injuries have made so I think with this whole process of looking back on teams and how they performed through the year is one of the starting points is and has to be is expectations. Okay. In the betting markets, Tottenham were the same price as Villa this year in terms of expected points totals. And, you know, the season before under Ange was sort of... There was a lot of excuses made in terms of just focusing on the Europa League. And I think there was an element to that. And obviously they finished 17th last year. And there was the expectation that they would come back this year under Thomas Frank and things would pick up drastically and they would be back contesting or competing for those top 4, 5, 6 spots in the league. And, you know, they made that great start under Frank. And then it all fell in a massive heap. You know, and the injuries definitely played a huge part in that. But there's no getting away from, this was a Tottenham team where they spent over £200 million last summer, on an already good team, and they were dreadful.
Yeah, and I'm giving them an F because off the field as well, they've been a disaster. Appointing Igor Tudor has to be one of the most worst decision. Most worst is not grammatically correct English, but appointing him, at least they made the decision that they had got it wrong and they appointed De Zerbi, and it wasn't an interim manager. They went down the route of they were lucky De Zerbi left Marseille, and yes, I think he'll do well, De Zerbi, but it's been an absolute disaster of a season, and only by the skin of their teeth they stayed up. As you said, they got 10 points from the last 5 games, so a quarter of their points came from the last 5 games out of a 38 game season. The 33 games of the season, they were relegation team. Absolute awful on and off the field for Tottenham.
Yeah, it's tough to do justice to how bad a season they've had. But as I say, injuries as bad as almost any team I can remember. But what we'll say with Tottenham, just quickly, when you look at the bench yesterday, there's, as you said, there's a big squad there of a lot of expensive players. And it's tough. I do have sympathy for them, but it's tough to have too much sympathy for them. You know, They have got a massive squad. Forest. So obviously Forest have had Europa League semi-finals. They've had 4 managers this year. I mean, Marinakis doesn't like a quiet. He doesn't like a quiet time. I don't know if you saw there's some footage yesterday of him fighting in the stands in the Euro League final basketball, as well. His shirt torn. I mean, yeah. Where do you even begin with a Marinakis-led Forest? Apart from you never know what you're going to get.
Exactly, Pereira's job's probably not safe there because he's probably thinking, I want to be in Europe next season again, so I enjoyed my trips around. I'm giving him a C. I think they didn't go down. They got to Europa League semi-final, which is a massive achievement for them, kind of thing, where they were. So I'm giving them a C. They've got some good players. I think they've got some good players. The issue is they're going to lose probably 2 of their best players. I see Murillo yesterday had signed a new contract, or was talk of it.
But he signed it. Signed a new contract.
He signed it. But they're going to lose Eddie Anderson to Man City. And Gibbs White, if what normally happens, he signed a contract last season, didn't he? An extension on a new contract. That will probably have a release clause in it that will work until a certain point during the summer that his agent will obviously know about, and he'll then be telling all the other clubs that, are you interested in my player for a certain price by the end of this certain date. So, and they've got a couple of other players. I really like Nico Williams. He's been very good for them this season, kind of thing. I didn't think he was all out at Liverpool as a kid, but he's been mighty impressive for them. So I'm giving them a C. They've done all right. I know they've been down the bottom. They were in relegation fight, but getting to Europa League semi-final at the same time in a relegation battle, it's quite some achievement. And the 4 managers, you've got to give the players a little bit of credit. They've gone through 4 managers this season.
Okay, so you're giving them credit because they've gone through 4 managers.
No, I know what you mean. I know it might laugh, but they've gone from so different managers, from Dyche to Pochettino, to Pereira and things like that. It's very different. It's not like going from Dyche to another Sam Allardyce, for example, kind of thing. They're very different managers, and what the players have been asked of them. So yeah, I'm giving them a C. I don't think it's been a bad season for Nottingham Forest.
I think 2 observations with Forest would be, one is they have played a lot of games, and it's not been helped that Chris Wood was out early on and for large parts of the season. So they're very reliant on him last year in terms of goal scoring. But the one observation I would make is Marinakis is super, super aggressive with his transfers and his ambitions, and you have to like that. Obviously, Forest, had a great season last year before just tailing off a little bit. They obviously made the Conference League originally before them and Palace obviously switched competitions, and I do worry for Forest that Forest spent a fortune last summer, and they spent it really quite poorly, I think, in terms of when you actually look at the signings they made and the returns that they've had. You look at the likes of Hutchinson's and McAtee's and these types of guys, and the return on their investment has been pretty poor, I think. And the worry would be for Forest is that, with a wage bill that is increasing as they need to keep the likes of Murillo's of the world, and I've seen it at Villa, it's so difficult to get that balance between giving players new contracts and and also spending a lot of money. And I just feel that they have financial mess absolutely on their doorstep, and just selling Anderson isn't going to touch the surface, to be honest, because the one thing they need to do is get their wage bill down. And they have a talk about bloated squads with teams like Tottenham. Forest have a pretty bloated squad, and they need to get, unless they're doing some more dodgy dealings to that club in Brazil. What's his name? The one who owns Crystal Palace, Textor, or whatever his name is, his club in Brazil.
I'll find out for you, because it's not talking my name, yeah. But yeah.
Unless the team is Bogafato or something.
Or something.
Anyway, but Forest have had some pretty interesting dealings with them in terms of selling players. So unless something happens with regard to that, is they're going to struggle to shift some of these players because they've had to bring them in on big wages. So I do worry for Forest a little bit. These financial rules are really, really punitive if you are one of the lesser teams trying to break into the top 5 or 6 teams.
Yeah, they haven't had a bad season, so that's why I've given them a seat.
Crystal Palace, obviously Glasner is off. He's had enough. They've got Conference League on Wednesday evening. So that in itself would be, you'd have to regard it as a good season if they win the Conference League. They haven't had a great Premier League season, but it felt from a long way out that their eye has been on that Conference League final, to be honest.
Yeah, this is Crystal Palace, though, isn't it? They finished 9th to 13th, 14th every season in the Premier League, so it's no difference from where they have been recently, kind of thing. They haven't really ever got up to top echelons of 6th, 7th, or 8th like that in the Premier League. So it's where they are. They've had a good season. Glasner's announced relatively early on, that he's leaving. They lost Mark Gay in January. It's a big player for them.
Eze last summer.
So you've got to look at things like that. Ismail Sarr's stood up. I talked to last week, I think, about it. He's had a great season for them. Mateta nonsense during January as well. So there's been a lot of off-field noise with them. The biggest one, obviously, is Glasner. I think they've had a good season. Premier League just now, I'll be giving them a B, solid B. If they win on Wednesday night, which they're decent favourites for, it'd be a solid A. It's big for them to win back-to-back. They obviously won the Charity Shield, which for them is a big thing for them to win. They won the FA Cup last season, and then going to win the Conference League, first European Cup for them, it'll be big, massive for them. You could even give them an A plus kind of thing.
And obviously they'd be in Europa League next year on the back of that as well.
Which they'd probably could fancy winning that as well. No reason why they wouldn't be higher up in the betting for that.
I definitely think they've done well they've certainly done really, really well to win the trophies that they have from this, from the team that they've had in terms of this relatively small window of opportunity. Whilst, I guess it's that sliding doors moment between Forest and Palace in terms of switching competitions, in terms of Forest not being in the Forest had been in the Conference League in the same situation Palace were in. I'd expect Forest to be in the final on Wednesday, and you'd be looking at next season thinking, oh well, Forest in the Europa League next year, and I don't know, it just feels like it actually benefited Palace by being in the Conference League rather than the Europa League.
Yes, 100%. But yeah, it's been a good season for Crystal Palace. They've got to get the managerial appointment correct in the summer. They obviously want Iriola, but as you touched on it earlier, that's a big, big sideways, downward step for me. But if they get him, happy days. If they get Iriola this summer, and you got him it doesn't matter if you get him for a year before a big team comes in for him. Would you take him for a year if you're Palace?
Right, so this is where it gets interesting. We touched on the value of managers last week at recent podcasts. If I was Palace, I'd much rather spend 20 million, 30 million getting Iriola than I would be bothered about bringing in a Guessond or any of these other players that they have.
Yeah.
You almost think absolutely break the bank for Iriola, like in terms of, the impact he would have on that club relative to any player that they could bring in.
And as I said just there, would you take him for a year? If you said to Iriola, you can just come for a year, and I only want to come for a year, do you take him or not?
I'm not sure. I think you'd want at least 2 years, I think. 1 year is a little bit short term.
I agree with you. However, he could win you the Europa League. He could get you somehow in the Champions League. I just think it's a weird... They clearly want him. They've clearly been given some sort of... not advice, but some sort of confidence that he might be interested in coming. Otherwise, why would they not appoint someone else already or not be any noise about who they're appointing? So... But anyway, it's been a good season for Palace. Let's move on to... Obviously, they play Vallecano Wednesday night, 8 o'clock UK time.
Leeds, I'd give Leeds an A. I think any time you're a promoted team, you come up, stay up. They were short on strikers at the start of the season, short on forward players. Made a relatively poor start to the season, including that 5-0 thumping at Arsenal when you thought, oh, here we go. Daniel Farke changed things in that Man City game at half time, went to the back three with wing backs, and I can't remember in all the time I followed football a single tactical decision a manager's made that's had a bigger impact on a club over the course of a season in a long, long time. It changed everything for them. Hats off to Farke, hats off to Leeds. As I say, I think pretty solid A, to be honest.
Yeah, that tactical change in January was. I mean, they were looking like they were going to get relegated. And to mid. I think they drew that game 2-2, didn't they, as well?
No. So
they lost 3-2 in the end, did they? Foden scored.
Foden scored late, yeah.
But anyway, they got back 2-2 into the game. But yeah, and then they haven't looked back at all, and they've been brilliant. I mean, forget the game yesterday. Irrelevant for them kind of thing. But yeah, it's an A for them. Daniel Farke has been up there as one of the best managers in the Premier League this season.
Everton are always an interesting one. When you look at the bare numbers in the end of the season, finishing 13th, I mean, I think for them, just solidifying and not having the drama of being in a relegation battle as they have a few times recently, moved into a new stadium. It's where Moyes is such a sort of steady hand. I think the season has promised more at times. I'm not sure it's necessarily been deserved, because I think they've been a bit flattered by results at times. And they've also had injuries to likes of Branthwaite, Grealish, which never helps. I just think it's been, I'd almost go something like a C. It's just been about as expected, really. I don't think they've been great. I don't think they've been bad. It's just been a solid season for them, really.
I was going to give them a D because they got 13th. They got 49 points in the Premier League. In a kind of a bad Premier League when you got Burnley and Wolves in it, who've got 20 points each kind of thing. But then I kind of give them a little bit of leeway because new stadium and things like this. And Goodison Park was a hard place to go to, and it was probably a big advantage playing at Goodison than playing at the Hill Dickinson Stadium. But they've got some talented players. Yeah, they have struggled with Branthwaite, but Tarkowski and Keane and Jake O'Brien are half-decent Premier League defenders. I just think his expectations, he's very good, Moyes, at reducing expectations at clubs he goes to, in terms of just his attitude in press conferences and his what do you expect and things like this. They've got some talented players. And Dye's a very good player. Dewsbury Hall's a good player. Yeah, Beto and Barry haven't been consistent as they probably liked. But there's no reason why they should have finished that far behind the likes of Sunderland and things like this.
I'm just looking at net spend for the season, just to give you an idea. And these are based on Squawkers figures, which are based on Transfer Market. So don't come back to me and say, oh, this. Okay, this is just a rough estimate. They were roughly seventh in terms of net spend, Everton, spending 120 million. So I think that would be the disappointing part, is that the likes of Dibbling just haven't worked out. It's been a disastrous signing, really. 40
million quid, yeah, and doesn't look getting anywhere near that side. Doesn't come off the bench hardly ever either.
Because I think the other thing you'll find with that Everton team, with the likes of Grealish, is the wage bill will have gone up quite a bit as well. I mean, one player they do have I do like is Ndie. And I think they'll do well to keep him. But yeah, I don't know. I suspect the owners would have wanted a little bit more. And honestly, 2 or 3 weeks ago, it looked like they might finish. They could easily have finished 8th or 9th. They've ended up 4 points behind Brentford in 9th place. And I guess doing this, if they'd finished 9th on the season, we'd have viewed this probably a little bit differently than we have.
Yeah, but I also look at points. That's why I mentioned 49 points isn't a great total at all.
Let's go on to our favourite club, James. Newcastle. F?
Yeah. E or F?
I mean, look, a 12th place finish on its own with Champions League football. They got to semi-finals of Carabao Cup before losing to City. They were a little bit unlucky in the FA Cup in that they had to play, I think, Bournemouth, Villa. It was against City. I can't remember who they ended
Did well, yeah.
up. City again. So they've been a little bit unlucky in terms of cup runs. They did pretty well in the Champions League for large parts before running into Barcelona. So I do have some sympathy for them. They obviously had a few injuries in that central midfield area as well. But I guess the rating of an F is more for their off-field activities. They obviously the whole Isak situation last summer was a complete mess. But it's not just the Isak situation, it was who they brought in to replace him. When you talk about horrendous transfer windows, I still think Newcastle will look back at last summer as a window that's going to hold them back for multiple years going forward. So when you look at Wissa, Walter Alanga, Ramsey, they've obviously the only one that turned out okay was Theo. So despite selling Isak, they're still, net spend wise, they were still coming in like ninth. They spent £250 million on players, James.
Yeah, I mean, F is probably a bit harsh in terms of we're giving it because a lot of it is off the field. Where they finished? They finished 12th, 49, 50 points, I think it was. Maybe it's a bit harsh, maybe slightly a D minus kind of thing, but they haven't been great at all kind of thing, and the last few games have been a complete dance squib. I mean, I know they beat West Ham at home, and they beat Brighton at home. I mean, I actually had a slight thinking 4 games ago they could go down kind of thing, but then they beat Brighton at home and they were safe kind of. If they lost the last 4 games, they would have been in trouble kind of thing. Or they could have been in trouble, but anyway. So maybe an F was slightly harsh kind of thing, but
I think D or E would be
D or an E would,
fairer.
yeah.
And one of the reasons why is there is from a betting purpose, every year there's a thing called handicaps. So each team is handicapped in terms of points, in terms of their expectation, and what they're trying to do is assign a handicap to every team in terms of the number of points a team would need for every team to effectively finish with the same total. Okay, so give you an example, the favourites pre-season were Liverpool, so they had a handicap of 0. Arsenal and Man City but were both getting 3 points on them, and you go down the league and a whole series of teams get given points. So to give you an example, Burnley were given 51 points, Sunderland 52, which reiterates what we were saying about Sunderland, and we'll come on to them in a minute. But on that table, Newcastle were given 15 points, and the only 3 teams who've finished with the worst points total when you take the handicaps into account were Wolves, Liverpool and Tottenham, which gives you an idea as to how much this Newcastle team has sort of underachieved this year.
Yeah, so it's probably a D stroke E kind of thing for them.
But I do think it is important you look at pre-season expectations. They did spend obviously good money, but they spent that money horrendously. Fulham, pretty standard for them, finished 11th place. Silva, whatever you say about Silva, is the job he's done at Fulham has been incredible, really. I think, he just manages to not get overly involved with relegation battles. They spent a little bit of money this year, not huge amounts in terms of, they just don't do much as a club. It's weird. But there is a continuity there with that club, and it's going to be interesting to see how they do without Silva.
Yeah, if he stays, or he goes, yeah. It's a B stroke. It's B probably, but high B stroke, B plus kind of thing.
I think
a decent.
B would be fine. I think anytime Fulham stay in the Premier League without having any issues about staying in the league, and they're also flirting with Europe at one point. They messed that up down the stretch. I think that's a decent season for Fulham, honestly.
Yeah, and they've got a couple of kids coming through. I mean, they bought Oscar Bob, didn't they? So they've got some talented players. Josh King, I see he's going as a not reserved for England, but he's going over to train for England with the World Cup squad kind of thing as well, and he looks a real talent. They might need to buy a centre forward in the summer, probably a goal, someone who can actually put the ball in the back of the net. But yeah, they've got Iwobi and things like that. So yeah, keeping Marco Silva is a big thing for them. Yeah, solid B for me for them.
Chelsea, James. Chelsea finished 10th.
F.
So the table I was talking about is Newcastle and Chelsea were the same. So in terms of expectations from pre-season,
Really?
I mean, well, Chelsea were expected to finish higher than Newcastle.
Yeah.
But I mean, look, the reality is that this Chelsea team, they came in, they spent a lot of money this summer again. The net spend wasn't massive, but what they did do was they obviously bought a lot of players, sold a lot of players, and coming into it on the back of the World Club Championship, having won the Conference League the year before as well. I can't believe for one moment they thought that anything beyond, a Champions League place was going to be an acceptable season. They've obviously gone through Maresca, Rosinha, and we've ended up with this Callum McFarlane at the moment, finishing the season off. Obviously, Xabi Alonso's going there next year. It's been a disaster, James. I mean, there's no getting away from it.
Absolutely. It's just like, I heard before pre-season all their expectations Champions League spot, which I find remarkable. It's Chelsea Football Club in the last 20 years since Roman came in, with his dodgy rubles came in. They've been challenging for titles. I know they weren't expected to challenge for the title this season.
No, but James, they weren't miles away, right? So
they weren't miles away from last. That's the thing, and they're not. They finished 10th in the Premier League. They're not even in conference football next season. 10th for those players, and the way that they've gone through. I mean, Maresca, I think, left in on New Year's Day, didn't he? In 5th place, kind of thing. So the drop off, as you said, since then, the second half of the season has been appalling. And they finished 10th. Chelsea Football Club finished 10th with the amount of money they've spent and the players they've got. I'm sorry, but it's been a disaster for the season, a poor season, really bad season for them.
I think what's interesting is, so if you look at something like, net spend is not always the best measure. It's better than money spent, but I saw something which looked at the last 5 or 6 years of net spent, and obviously United. So it is important a little bit, but you have United top with over 800 million, Arsenal second at 760 million, Chelsea third at 750 million. And I think with Chelsea it is important to sort of remember that is, yes, last year that they sold a lot of players because they had to for financial reasons, but this is a squad that they have spent an absolute fortune constructing, and they're miles off it, James.
Yeah, it's just a horrendous season for them.
Brentford obviously finished in 9th place. If you'd asked this 3 or 4 weeks ago, I think we'd be looking at an A. I think it's been a poor finish to the year. I think they've only got 5 points from the last 5 games, when a single point more would have got them into Europa League. They should have made Europa League at least. And yeah, it's been a poor finish. 80% of the season has been unbelievable for them, but these last few weeks have cost them dear.
Still giving them an A minus, B plus kind of thing that way. Last season they lost Norgard, their club captain. They lost Brian Mbeumo and Johan Wiese, their 2 main goal scorers. They lost Thomas Frank as well, so they lost 4 key individuals at the football club. They appointed Keith Andrews, a set-piece coach who's never taken a managerial job before in his career. They went to Forest on the first day of the season and got spanked 3-1, I believe it was, but they're 3-0 down after 20 minutes. And everyone's going, what is going on here, kind of thing. And then to where that's the first game, and then the last 5, the 32-game season, it's an A. Like, everyone, it's just the way they've had to 4 senior individuals at football club left. An A for me. I know the last 5 games they've tailed off a bit and things to this, but they still finished 9th in the Premier League with the points total an A for me.
I think it's been as you say, it's been a great season for them. I think there was a wonderful irony in that Forest game opening season. Keith Andrews, set piece coach appointed. They conceded within 5 minutes to a corner.
I know,
You think,
but they only
and you
actually.
thought this is going to be a long season.
I was listening to a game yesterday. I think they were bottom. They only conceded 4 all season from corners. I believe. Best in the league.
One thing I will say, I am intrigued to see what happens with KOD.
Yeah.
Is that long throw is such a weapon, and I just wonder if one of the big boys, crunching the data, as long as they don't limit the impact that throw-ins have. So obviously it takes a little time to get it all set up, and if they suddenly say you're only allowed X number of seconds per throw-in, it could limit his impact a little bit. But I'm intrigued to see if one of the big boys might be interested. We've seen how valuable set pieces are. It really does make a difference.
I think he's a decent defender as well. He's actually not a bad defender. But yeah, having that set pieces and things like that is a weapon you can use.
Brighton, I think, obviously again, we got what you have to obviously they finished 8th. I guess what you have to make sure you don't, it's been a really good season for them at the middle part. They finished poorly, 3 losses in the last 4 games, and again, it's cost them massively. But I think all said and done, Hertzler, you have to take your hat off to him. I mean, he, as I said, we said many weeks ago, is he found something when Pascal Gross came back into the lineup. I'm still not sure about some of the lineup decisions he makes, but he's done an amazing job there. One of the problems they have next year is the extra games. It does make it difficult for these teams, those extra games. It's no coincidence that this year, you've got teams who finished 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th. None of them had European football. They've got a 38-game season in the Premier League, a few cup competitions outside of that, but no European football makes it so much easier.
Yeah, talked about it a lot on this pod, haven't we, about the travel, different hotels, eating different food, different times you're getting back, playing at 8 o'clock, getting home at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, etc. It's a big thing for them. Yeah, Brighton, B plus kind of thing. The way Hertzler was in January, February, when his job was under threat and he was coming out with some weird comments in the press and doing weird team selections. Did you say that Pascal Gross signing has helped him a lot, bit of experience? Because he is only a kid. He's only a 33-year-old, isn't he? So, took over when he was 31, so... I mean, they've bought some slightly concerning transfers with the lads up front, the Greek lad who's been injured most of the season as well. So it's decent. Look, they got Conference League football next season, so they probably need to strengthen the midfield. But will he stay? He probably wants to angle out kind of thing. United will still be sniffing around him, so his value isn't as high as it was this time last year, put it that way. But yeah. And Matoma, can't rely really much on him because he's just so injury prone kind of thing. But yeah, it's a decent season, B plus for them.
Sunderland, A.
I think plus.
I think what's interesting. So I was touching earlier on the handicap situation, and I think people forget sometimes is that Sunderland were favourites to finish bottom of the league. Burnley were expected to get more points than them. Sunderland had come up as the playoff winner. They hadn't been convincing. They had a poor year in the Championship relatively last year. They were favourites to get relegated. And when you look at teams like your Wolves of the world, Wolves were projected to get 13 more points than Sunderland. It wasn't expected to be particularly close. So for them to end up in 7th place and European football is literally absolutely bonkers.
Said it earlier, it's one of the most remarkable achievements in Premier League history. Special mention for Granit Xhaka as well, coming from Leverkusen. He's been absolutely fantastic. First half of the season, he was brilliant for them. Yeah, A++. It's been one of the best seasons by a promoted club I can remember.
It's gonna be interesting how they do next year because they are massive candidates for a massive regression because from a data perspective, they massively overachieved for large parts of the year. Now, I think with Sunderland is a bit like Villa in some respects. Is I don't think the data always tells the whole story. I think they're better than what the data was showing potentially. But with European football as well next year, I think it could be quite tricky for them in terms of when you have the 8 group games, those next games after, they are so difficult if you're not used to it. And this Sunderland team isn't going to be used to it. And it has such a big knock-on effect on those, not just those 8 games, but the number of injuries you pick up throughout the season and things like that as well.
Yeah, but this season, outrageous.
Bournemouth, you have to go in A. I mean, Iriola, 18 games unbeaten to finish the season. They last lost to, I think it was Arsenal in January. They went through that run where they didn't win for about 10 games as well. So, and when you look at where they were going into the season in the summer, they'd just lost 3 out there. They'd lost Kerkez at left back. Huijsen had obviously gone to Madrid. Kepa had gone back to Chelsea before then going to Arsenal. And they lost another defender who I can't think of on the top of my head.
He went to PSG.
Zabani.
So Barney went to PSG to sit on PSG's bench, yeah.
Yeah, so they lost 80% of their defence, and and it looked like it early doors. Not only that, they lost Cliver injured for most of the season. They obviously sold Semenyo in January. I mean, honestly, when you take everything into account, Iriola, unbelievable job, and actually they would be another club I would worry about in terms of massive regression without Iriola there. Is the worry would be is that they do sell a couple of their better players, and like Krupies of the world, someone like an Alex Scott maybe, and I think they're pretty big candidates to regress quite markedly. I think without Iriola there.
A++, like Sunderland, unbelievable season for them. 18 unbeaten. Just have a think about it. Nearly half the season. 8 in this league. How competitive it is. 18. And as you said, they lost 80% of their back 5. Lost one of their main chief goal threats in Semenyo in January. I know they replaced him with Ryan, who looks an unbelievable talent kind of thing. He settled in brilliantly in the Premier League kind of thing, young kid. But yeah, they've got quite a young squad as well. They're going to probably lose Senesi as well this summer. I see Marco Royce is coming in. Royce, I don't know how you pronounce it exactly, but he's obviously been appointed. So yeah, it's been unbelievable season. Yeah, brilliant. A++.
Liverpool, James, I give them an A for providing entertainment value for me. Week in, week out, never, Slot and his minions haven't done anything but, provided you with content. So a big fat A for me. Any thoughts from you?
A for my betting accounts, yeah. An F for on-field performances, just an F, isn't it? One of the worst title defences in living memory. Lem and Leicester City being the 2 worst title defences in the last 10 years. Shambles, absolute shambles. I know they've had the off-field issue with the passing of Diogo Jota, and they've had some injuries, but not major injuries like Tottenham and other clubs, and every club really gets a load of injuries. I've talked about it to blue in the face. Absolute disaster season. And FSG backing slot, they look like their backing slot is yet to be confirmed, but is not a good look for the football club. And as a fan, I'm really worried the way that they're taking the club. I mean, he should be sacked. It's been bad since March 2025. But anyway, yeah, it's been a.
I do think it's been a bit unlucky.
He's lost control of the dressing room as well, Slot, by the way, as well. So that's one big thing.
And been a bit unlucky in that Isak was clearly the figure piece of their sort of transfer window. Ekitike obviously got injured as well, but I don't know. I just find it people don't learn, and we get the situation every summer where a team goes and spends a fortune, and everyone proclaims them, oh, that's an amazing transfer window, etc., etc. And it's amazing how often it doesn't actually pan out that way. And you know, I think for Liverpool to finish below Villa and 5 points behind Villa after that start to the season for both clubs, it is an absolute shambles of a season.
Yeah, so Liverpool have lost 19 games in all competitions this year. 19 games in all competitions. Forget the Charity Shield, it's a pre-season friendly. If you want to announce that, that's 20. So they won 5 out of 5, so they got 15 points from the first 5 games. And the last 33 league games, Liverpool have got 45 points. None of his players that he bought in the summer started yesterday. He has no ability to get the best out of the players. Yeah, they've had Isaac, Hugo Ekiti. Anyway, he just has no idea. And yeah, it's 40. I mean, yeah, enough said. He's just not good enough, and he never will be good enough. And the body of work is there. They won the league last season on muscle memory from Klopp and outrageous seasons by 2 or 3 players. And this is the way he wants Liverpool to play, and it's not the way you're going to win the Premier League or do anything. They got 45 points from 33 Premier League games, and they lost 19 in the whole season. No.
James, I think they were really, really unlucky, and I think that Slot, having guided you to success the previous year, he's the man to back. And, you know, you just need your superstars fit again, and we'll see a completely different Liverpool team.
As I said earlier, you could have £200 billion, and you could buy whoever you want, and he still wouldn't win the league next season. And this fast wingers business, absolute rubbish, just a medium miss kind of thing. Go and look at Feyenoord. He didn't have fast wingers at Feyenoord. It's just like, and he's got fast wingers this year. In the last few weeks with Rio, and he's played Frimpong up there and things like this. It's just not. It doesn't matter who Liverpool buys there. They'll struggle to finish top 4 next season.
I think the other thing is he hasn't handled situations very well. So
correct.
I don't think Salah has behaved that well, if I'm honest, this year.
No, I agree with you.
When you look at the body of work of what he's done since September, let's say, you know, in terms of all the whining when he got dropped, a lot of poor performances. Yes, I know he's being played not in an optimal position and everything else, right? But there has been a lot of off-field distractions with Salah in terms of the back and forth between the two of them. You know, AFCON came around actually and helped diffuse the situation a little bit. And then Salah was sort of integrated back into the team. And then obviously all the comments in the last couple of weeks. I don't think Salah's done himself any huge favours. I don't think Salah probably cares, to be honest, either.
He definitely cares about Liverpool Football Club.
I'm not saying he doesn't care about Liverpool Football Club, but there's an element where he feels like he's bigger than the club at times in this little spat. And I don't think he comes out of it with, you know, as great a player as he has been for Liverpool. I don't think... I'm intrigued to see where he goes. I think one of the things would be is his performances to start the year weren't great and had been a drop-off. And, you know, like all these things, if you're performing on the pitch, it's a lot easier to, you know, have criticisms of people and things like that. But when you're not actually performing either, it is tricky. But I don't think Slot has handled the situation particularly well. And it sounds like there's lots of stuff with Curtis Jones as well. And, I mean, you touched on it to me on messages that it sounds like Alisson was having issues with him as well. So it's not just 1 or 2 players. It sounds like there is quite a bit of dressing room disharmony, should we say. And I think it's shown in the performances. I mean, we're not privy to what is going on behind the scenes at times, but you only have to look at that Liverpool team and the performances that they're putting out there from an effort point of view to see that it's a club that has massive issues at the moment.
Yeah, you talked about it. They can get up for games like Real Madrid, but then they lose at home to PSV Eindhoven 4-1 and Nottingham Forest under Sean Dyche 3-0 in 4 days. And we're expected to take that as acceptable. No. Anyway, moving on to another solid performance by Unai Emery. A++.
Unbelievable, really, given that Again, I think you always have to look at context. So Villa went into that season obviously with a disappointment of what happened at Man United last year in terms of not getting Champions League place, and it felt like that almost potentially the era for Villa's success was over. There was so much discontent around the club. There was talk about Martinez leaving. Obviously, Ramsey had to be sold. And it's one of those recurring themes that Villa have had to keep selling. Whether it be a Duran, a Diaby, a Douglas Luiz, all these sort of players that just keep selling, and it felt like it sort of caught up with Villa a little bit. Started the season off abysmally, didn't score in the first 5 games, lost 3 or 4 of those games, and yet here we are. They're finished 4th by a comfortable margin. They're 8 points clear in terms of qualifying for the Champions League spots this year. Won the Europa League. There's only so many times I can say Emery's a genius, but given what he's had to work with, every other club out there went and spent literally hundreds of millions of pounds. All the ones around Villa, whether it be the ones we were expected to compete against, whether it be a Newcastle, a Tottenham, a Chelsea, all these teams, Liverpool, obviously, all Man United, were all spending literally hundreds of millions of pounds, and Emery wasn't able to do that. And there's not much more I can say, really, apart from the fact that 4 years he's been at Villa, qualified for Europe 4 years. Villa have had so many games this year, just in terms of from a fixture list perspective, and unlike what teams like Newcastle have done, where they've had big drop-offs in years that they've had Champions League football, Emery's managed to keep Villa consistently in there. It's just nuts.
And you didn't have a great transfer window, brought Guess on for silly money, and obviously the issue was Harvey had it, and then you lost the director of football 3 weeks into the start of the season in September.
I think what
Monchi?
I would say
was it Monchi left?
Monchi. What I would say is
so he left.
Two signings were made that were pretty underrated. One was Bizot in goal. He was a much better backup than Ollison was, and what it meant was that when Martinez did miss games, the drop off wasn't nearly as severe. And then the other one was like some Lindelof, get him on a free transfer, and just that bit of experience. I think he's apparently really, really good around the dressing room. And actually, sometimes it isn't your big money signings. It's sometimes these little pieces that make a big difference. So loads of Villa fans pan Villa's transfer record, and it's not been great. And some of them, they had to get rid of Milan mid-season in January. Not ideal in any shape or form. He's gone crazy at Roma since then. But a lot of it's financial decisions rather than actually footballing decisions. And despite all that noise, Emery's consistently produced. And one player who has been brilliant, by the way, this year was Emi Martinez. When you talk about levels, his levels, he had a bit of a down year the year before. His levels this year have been unbelievably high. And the other one would be, obviously, Watkins finished as, if you strip out penalties, he had the second most goals from any player this year. He is a complete enigma to me. I watch him at times and think he would struggle in League Two. And then you see the goal he scored yesterday against Man City, the second goal. Unbelievable goal. I mean, truly a confidence player. Truly also a player who, his all-round game is so important to what Emery's trying to do. But yeah, Emery, it's just fun to have him as your manager. There's not much more I can say, really.
Yeah, I mean, he did all right at PSG, but obviously almost impossible job when he followed Wenger at Arsenal kind of thing and then rebuilt his career kind of thing. Yeah, it's been a brilliant season for Villa kind of thing.
Manchester United, obviously change of manager. Amorim had been doing better than the year before. It wasn't a case of it being a complete car crash under him. Carrick came in and made a really good start. I think Carrick has obviously been given the job permanently. All said and done for United, I think you'd have to say it's an A. Just on the basis that, it's easy when you don't have loads of fixtures. it's very easy for people to say, oh, surely you need to qualify for Champions League and all this sort of stuff. But they managed to do it. They spent a lot of money last summer with Sesko, Cunha, and Burmo. Fair play to them. I think they've massively overachieved in recent weeks. They've had some very fortuitous results, I think, based on what's actually happened. So I wouldn't be surprised to see some kind of regression under Carrick. But on the body of work they've actually shown this year, and obviously it'd be remiss to not mention Bruno and what an incredible season he's had.
Yeah, it's a solid A minus B. They've taken advantage of a couple of other teams being downright awful, haven't they? But they've got into the Champions League. They've got 70 points plus, haven't they? So 71. So it's it's not a bad season points tally wise for a club. This is Manchester United, by the way. So where they finished last season as well, kind of thing as well. So they've got a lot more points, obviously. They tanked end of last season for that Europa League kind of thing anyway. Carrick's come over. He's gone 4-2-3-1 away from Amarin's 3 at the back kind of system. He's got Bruno back in his normal position, and he has had a great season. He equalled the assist record yesterday. He is getting on a bit. To blue in my face, Michael Carrick should not be Manchester United manager. He's only Manchester United manager because he's next player. Any other big club would not be even thinking about Michael Carrick. They wouldn't be thinking. Do you think PSG, Real Madrid, Barcelona, Munich?
Right, here's a question for you then. Manchester City, let's say, looking to replace Pep, would Carrick have been in the top 50 candidates to replace him?
No.
Based on what he's done before he came back to Man United. So obviously, having been at Man United, it's slightly different, but before he obviously joined Man United, coming back, he wouldn't have been in the top 50 candidates at Manchester City. And I think that's what we're talking about, is there's different levels. And it just feels like United have made the same mistake again as they did with Solskjaer.
Yeah.
And are we going to, my worry with United is that when you keep having 200 million to spend every year, you can keep bringing 3 or 4 good players, that eventually they're going to get it right. That'd be my worry. But under Carrick, I don't know. I struggle to see it.
I watch them play and I think they're bang average. I really do. I don't look at them and go, oh, I can see patterns of play, I can see the way they're trying to play. I mean, they sold all their left wingers, and people say, they need to sell Garnacho, Rashford, and whoever, but they need wingers. And Laman's in goal. He's been decent signing for them for £18 million. Can't really complain, but Luke Shaw can't play more than once a week. He's only been fit this season. He had a good season because he hasn't played any European football. Still think Dado's an ordinary right back. And at centre back, Maguire's getting on. He's 33, 34. Martinez just back off an ACL. De Ligt's got a bad back. I know Haven looks a really talented prospect, but his body of work is 5 months or 20 games kind of thing. I think they've made exactly the same thing as Solskjaer. I think it's Solskjaer 2.0. So, I don't think they're going now. I wouldn't be worried about them winning the title in the next 5 years, I don't think. Even if they do go and spend another 500 million pounds. Carrick ain't winning any title. Although he has done a good job when he seems been appointed, so let's get out there kind of thing. And they have got back in the Champions League, which they needed to for financial reasons, and so they should do. The stature of the club on and off the field as well. But B probably for them.
I think Man City, I think you have to sort of separate overall season and the league season. I think they've been relatively poor in the league this year. I know they've been in the title race for a long time, but they've ended up with a points total of 78 points. I mean, they spent fortunes in the summer, they spent fortunes in January. They just continue to spend fortunes under Guardiola. Obviously, Guardiola's left now. They've obviously won the double, which puts them in good shape from that perspective. More trophies. They were poor in Europe. I think it's just been a bang average season from, I'd probably say C or a D, to be honest. And that's despite them doing a domestic double, by the way. it sounds almost churlish, but I think by their high lofty standards recently, it's not been a good year.
See, yeah, they won domestic double, but I don't really pay too much attention to that. When the Carabao Cup, most teams just want to get out of it anyway, and they play the kids, or certainly the reserves, and same with the FA Cup to a certain extent. And it's the luck of the draw. Chelsea played no one, got to the final, could have beaten Man City, and everyone goes, "Oh, they won the FA Cup," but you played the likes of Port Vale in the quarter final, kind of thing. So I think they were like 78 points for stature of Manchester City in recent years is bang average. 78 points. And the amount of money, as you said, and I said last week, they spent a silly amount of money in the last 18 months trying to win both the last two Premier League titles. And they got kind of embarrassed by Real Madrid again this season, kind of thing, in the Champions League. So, yeah, to see, they've been bad this season. For relatively what they were the expectations of them second in the Premier League last season, kind of, or not second but third kind of thing. But what people expected under Guardiola.
Arsenal, I think it's a pretty simple A. I mean, it's been a long time since won a title. It is a results business. You know, if this was how much pleasure have Arsenal brought you in terms of watching football, it would be an F. I mean, the football they've played is, for a team as talented as them, is borderline disgraceful. But honestly, they have been so effective at what they've done, and hats off to them for actually finishing it off, getting over the line, and with that monkey off the back, I'm just very intrigued to see if they can actually kick on to the next level and actually start playing football befitting of the squad of players that they actually have. You know, you've got some amazing youngsters in there like your Dowmans and your Lewis Skellies and Nwaneris. Yeah, they spent a fortune. I mean, let's be really clear. They did spend a fortune again last summer to get themselves into this position. You know, this isn't some fairy tale. You know, I don't care what Delaney says in the press. This is not some fairy tale situation where an underdog has beaten, overcome terrible odds. You know, they have spent a fortune under Arteta since he's been a manager. You know, I was touching on net spend earlier. Since 21-22, the only team above Arsenal in terms of net spend is Man United, and they have spent fortunes, but fair play to them. It's been a great season for them, and they obviously have the chance for a historic, really, double, really, in terms of Champions League next weekend.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's an A at the moment. If they win the Champions League on Saturday night, it's an A++ kind of thing. Look, they got ahead of the curve, didn't they? They realised the Premier League was going this way in terms of big physical players, set piece dominated. They got ahead of the curve, and they hadn't won it for 22 years, and the pressure was on. Last 3 years, they come second, so all the noise was, you've got to do it this year, and they can't bottle it again. And they got over the line, got 85 points, and yeah, fair play to them. Congratulations. But as he said, I don't believe he's got the ability, though, Arteta as a manager, to go and open up and be expansive. He's been there 6 years, and he's never done it. He's never shown to me that you can actually go out there and put a team out there and go, right, we're going to dominate from start to finish, and you're not going to get near us, like Wenger did and blew teams away in the first 20-25 minutes. And then you can sit back and take your foot off the pedal because you're 2-3 up. The league has changed, obviously, in that regard, but Arteta's shown no body of work that he can actually be not expand. It doesn't need to be expansive. It's more just, where does he say, they've got some talented players, and he just not doesn't allow them, or he doesn't want to play that way. It's all about not losing games of football, and they are very hard to beat, and that's what's won them the league. They've beaten the Dross, and they've won the league. Who have they beaten this season? Go back to it. Did they beat Man City? No. Did they beat Liverpool? No. They lost to United, you know what I mean? But they've just beaten the Dross, and that's what wins you the league, essentially. And yeah, it's the hardest league to win. They've won it, congratulations. I still think they'll get battered by PSG on Saturday night. I think there's levels, and I think they're way short of the level of PSG, but it's a final. One-off games, but as a neutral, you probably want PSG to win that, the way they play football. But Arsenal go into that and think, yeah, we've got a massive chance.
Yeah, doing these sorts of things is always tough because getting that balance between like outcomes and performances and expectations, and if I'd said to you, given the money Arsenal spent at the start of the year, they'd get 85 points. I think you'd almost say it was almost. I think their expectation was they were going to get. I've got it here. Their expectation was they were going to get 82 points. I think it was. Is that right? Yeah, I think it was 82 points was the expectation coming into the year. So, I definitely think they've been the beneficiaries of Liverpool being really poor this year, and not putting up a better title defence and spending all that money. In some respects, actually, Liverpool have probably helped Arsenal by taking the attention off them early on in the season. A lot of the attention was actually, despite Arsenal spending a lot of money, a lot of the attention was on Liverpool and Isak and Ekitike and, rather than your Eze's of the world, Zubimendi's. So I think that probably helped Arsenal a little bit early on in the season. But, they've put a points total up, which is pretty much as expected. The difference is it's been a tight, that's been enough to get the title.
Yeah, I didn't expect 85 points to win the title this year, I must admit. I thought you'd have to get minimum 90, and they got 85. But yeah, look, they won it by 7 points.
So that's a look at all the teams and how they've had it in terms of relative seasons. There's been a lot of smaller teams who've probably overachieved. Been a lot of big teams, particularly that Chelsea, Newcastle, Liverpool, Tottenham, sort of, who have massively underachieved. And it's very difficult when you look at each season. It's tough to have imagined some of that actually happening, and it just shows you the beauty of sport. I'd have really struggled to imagine some of these things. Can you imagine the 17th place team from last year finishing 17th this year? I'm obviously being facetious, but it is still tough to imagine.
Yeah, I don't think it's been a great Premier League season aesthetically watching games either. And they've got an awful lot of law changes need to be made. And talking of law changes, I think we'll do a podcast at some point in the near future before the World Cup looking at what we would like to be changed as some law changes need to be changed.
So two stats for you, James. One that I obviously told you yesterday. So Villa were the most fouled team in the Premier League this season. 0 penalties, which is impressive. But the more interesting stat, arguably, is there wasn't a single team who scored 6 goals in a single game this year. Basically, the first time that's happened since, I think, the 1880s. Which gives you an idea as to where football's sort of headed.
Yeah, and my final point of the season is that there wasn't an outstanding player this season, if you get what I mean. There wasn't one standout player in the Premier League. There always has been a standout individual, or more than one at various points in the season, or seasons, excuse me. There hasn't been an outstanding player. Yes, Declan Rice has had a good season, but I'm struggling to think of when he really was a wow performance by Declan Rice this season. Yes, Bruno's carried Manchester United, and he's got the assist record, but I'm struggling to think when you go, wow, what a performance over, there hasn't been a standout player for me in the Premier League season this year.
No, agreed. But yeah, so that's look back at the Premier League. I'm sure we'll do other stuff ahead of next season, looking back maybe at transfers and all sorts of different things we can do. But hats off to Arsenal for winning the league. Good riddance to the garbage at the bottom. Fair play Sunderland, Brighton and Bournemouth in terms of European qualifications. And let's see what summer brings in terms of transfers and whether teams are restricted because of financial fair play, and just see how that sort of pans out. We obviously have a World Cup to look forward to. Just quickly, Wednesday night, obviously Palace have their Conference League final against Rayo Vallecano. And then next weekend we have Arsenal, Paris Saint-Germain. But I mean, there's not a huge amount to say about Palace. Vallecano. Palace are clearly, the better team. I think Premier League shown how strong it is, and I would expect Palace to win that game. Maybe not necessarily in normal time, but certainly over the whole contest, you'd expect Palace to come through in that particular game.
Yeah, they've got some goal scorers, Palace, and they can rely on Sarr, Mateta, Strand Larson, etc. So Morton will be back playing as well. So yeah, so I expect them to win. I mean, they're even money in the betting, so.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, James, as always. And I think on Friday you're not here, so I think I will do an episode with John. We'll try and think of something interesting to do. How many ways can we see Paris Saint-Germain beating Arsenal or something like that? I'm only jesting. But we will catch up on Friday.
Yeah, speak to you all. Have a good week.